Hello and welcome back to the Girl Fit Method podcast. Guys, today's podcast, we have a returning guest and probably one of my favorites between me and you. Don't tell anyone else, but I think this is my favorite guest. Drum roll, please. Let's introduce the incredible Diana. Welcome back, Diana. How are you?
Hello, I am incredible. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And yes, you are incredible. For anyone that hasn't listened to Diana's past podcast episodes, Diana's a client of Girl Fit Method and has had a ginormous transformation. You've been with us for 2.5 years at
This
this
month,
point.
2.5 years.
Actually, I want to hand it over to you. What has changed in the past 2.5 years, Diana?
Oh gosh, what has changed? Simply put, everything about my life has changed. I think most girls sign up for Girl Fit Method because they have goals of changing their body. And although that did happen for me, so much more happened.
Yeah.
So much more happened.
It's been such a transformation, both inside and out. And I thought today's podcast episode, we could really talk about the difficulties of reverse dieting and the mental aspect of things, because that's probably the hardest thing I think girls deal with. And I know for you as well, Diana, it's been incredibly difficult. And even for myself in my own experience, even now when I'm to increase my calories, it still feels incredibly uncomfortable. And I think just knowing that others feel that same way can be really comforting and also encouraging for you to push through, because we can give up when things start to feel really uncomfortable. But, as we're going to delve into your story, Diana, if you had done that, you wouldn't be where you are now. And every phase of your fitness journey is necessary in order to achieve the end goal that you're wanting to achieve. So let's give like a really quick recap, Diana, of who you are and essentially what led you to GFM.
Sure. So I am 35 next week, living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have been yo-yo dieting my entire life. So the big fad diets, you name it, I did it. So I did keto, I did the cabbage soup diet, I did Weight Watchers, all the things. And losing weight is easy, but then maintaining pretty much never happened for me, ever. And the reason I decided to invest in a coach this time was because every time that I would gain weight back from a weight loss journey, I would gain 20 plus. So for example, I was 210 pounds. I lost the weight. Next time I was 230, 231. And then after COVID, I found myself over 250 pounds, 33 years old and single, and not feeling like myself. I am an extroverted extrovert.
Mhm.
And it got to a point where I didn't even want to make plans with people because the idea of people seeing me in what I thought was an embarrassing state, I didn't want to leave my house. And I randomly found Girl Fit Method on Instagram and signed up for the call with you. And 2.5 years later, here we are.
It's absolutely wild, isn't it? It's crazy. So, like, just commenting on that and your past, Diana, you do have a pretty common story to a degree. I think it's this history of the yo-yo dieting, which we all know about. But I think what we've discovered whilst working together is that it's much deeper than that surface line, just wanting to lose weight and then also just trying new fad diets. It's been about changing self-beliefs and challenging thoughts, and really stretching the parameters of what you think you're capable of as well. And you're an incredibly strong person. You've always inspired me because of your outlook. You're an incredibly optimistic go-getter, which I absolutely love. But in saying that, with all the strength that you do have, this has been really difficult for you. And so overall, you've lost a huge amount of weight, which is so amazing. And it's been the calorie deficit cycles within your time with us that's been the easiest. And you would definitely, I suppose, agree with that. But the most difficult times have been the times we've had to take you out of a deficit and pop you back into a reverse diet or have you stay at maintenance that you found really difficult? And I want to throw it over to you. Let's talk about that. Why do you think that being in a deficit for you has been probably the easiest part of your journey?
I would say is the easiest part because you go in, I went in, I don't want to speak for listeners, but I went in with body goals, right? And not body composition, how I'm looking at things now. I went in of I had a goal weight. I had this number in mind. I had a look in mind. I had the jeans and the dress in my closet from 5, 8 years ago. That was my goal to fit back into. And when you're in a deficit, even though it takes time to get there, you're seeing the progress in whether it's the progress photos, the measurements, the scale weight. You're seeing yourself moving towards a goal that you've put in your mind. And as humans, we want to identify a goal, a light at the end of the tunnel. And so in a deficit, you're moving towards that. And in a reverse, you're reversing away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Totally. I think you're so incredibly right. And I know everyone's going to resonate with this because when we're not visually seeing the changes, we can then equate that to not getting closer towards our goal. And this is the problem with only setting yourself, well, I guess having short-term vision, right? Because in order to reach whatever end goal that we're wanting to achieve, there's a journey and there are stages and a process essentially that we need to make in order to achieve that goal. And what I try and remind our girls of is that this is actually getting you closer. You are taking steps forward towards that, let's just say your dream body, like what you're wanting to attain. But that is the journey. It's not going to be linear. Like it's not going to be, you're at point A, you want to get to point B, and in order to get from point A to point B, it's like this. It's really not like this. We need to work with your body, but also like there's life that gets in the way too. And so being realistic about having to sit in uncomfortable situations and but also realizing that just because you're not seeing that number decrease or your measurements decrease doesn't mean that you're not moving towards that goal. And just for anyone that's maybe a new listener, what we're referring to here is that if you've got weight to lose, and for you, Diana, there was a substantial amount of body fat that you needed to drop, we couldn't just keep you in a deficit for 2.5 years. Essentially, all that's going to lead to is plateauing, so your weight loss plateauing, and then also, a bad relationship with food. And really, that would just be the strategy that you had used all the time, is just eat as little as possible or try a new diet constantly, which got you nowhere. You need to spend time absolutely in a calorie deficit, but then what you need to do is take yourself out of that deficit for a period of time as well. Allow your body to actually kind of prepare to go back into a deficit. And it's those parts in between that can be really difficult. In saying that, I guess, what have you found to be helpful to push you through those times that have felt really uncomfortable for you during your reverse diet?
I am a very curious person. And I think what I've done in the past is I took all of the responsibility upon myself and I would just like Google how to do something and then just do it. I'm a very motivated person. You tell me to do something and I'm going to do it. I'm going to overexceed always. But what helped me this time is I actually did lean on my coaches and I asked a ton of questions. I wanted to understand the science. Obviously, me yo-yo dieting has never worked for me before. So what am I doing differently this time? What are the parts that are easy that are working for me and that were feeding my curiosity and my self-awareness? But then what were the things that were so difficult for me? And I kept asking my coaches questions because I knew that even though I had my why of why I wanted to lose weight, why I had a certain body type in mind, I knew in my logical brain that there was also a why for the process and a why that like Girl Fit Method isn't just making something up out of thin air. Like they're using stuff that works. There's no secrets to becoming the healthier version of yourself. And I needed to know that why. I had my why, but I needed to know the big why
Yeah.
of okay, this works.
Yeah. And I think I love that point. And I think we're really similar in that instance, in that if we can intellectualize, that's not the word, intellectualize, that's the
Mhm.
word, why we're doing what we're doing. And if there's reason and if there's science behind something, then you can trust in it. When we're just blindly going off of information, then when things get really uncomfortable, it's like, well, why are we doing this? Like, what is the point of this? And I think if something makes sense, people are more likely to continue with it, even if it feels uncomfortable, because you actually understand the process. And I actually love that, Diana. Like, you have been a sponge and you have wanted to learn so much to the point where it's inspired you so much to become a trainer yourself, which is like so unbelievable. And like the process works. The process works. That's why you've gotten to where you are. And one thing that I really liked about you, which has made me laugh, is that you're such an honest person, which I really I laugh. Because sometimes the messages I get from you, I just think, oh my gosh, if I didn't know you, I'd be like, excuse me? And I just go, oh, yeah, I know exactly where she's coming from. And just voicing how you're feeling, like no filters. And as a coach, I mean, that's our role, right? Is we're supposed to support you, but also being really honest with your coach about how you're feeling. Or if you don't have a coach with a really close friend, just putting it out there sometimes helps. Like just vocalizing, getting what's in your brain and bringing that and getting it out of your mouth can be so therapeutic because you can start to actually work through your thoughts and your feelings. If, especially if you're a verbal processor, and the majority of women are, like we do need to talk about how we're feeling, and it can make this big problem in our head actually become much smaller. If we can actually just communicate how we're feeling and be really honest. I'm just reflecting back on my own reverse dieting journey, and I think the most uncomfortable feeling is when you've been in a deficit and then you start to eat more, even if you haven't been in a deficit, just say like you're eating at maintenance. As soon as you start to increase that food, when you're not feeling hungry and you feel like you need to eat something and you're getting out of that routine that you know is almost safe because it's maintained your weight or it's allowed you to look a certain way. You're sort of taking a step out in the dark, hoping that by eating more, you're not going to undo all of the progress that you have done in the past. And I don't think there's two ways of getting around that without feeling less scary and uncomfortable. And I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Diana, is that the more you've done a reverse diet, when you have those feelings and those fears pop up, you're able to reflect back and go, hold on, I've done this before. And what was the outcome? Is my fear rational or is it irrational? Because it just feels uncomfortable. And it's almost a comforting thing. I'd say the first reverse diet is always the scariest for most women because you've got no past evidence to go off what has actually happened. Has it been successful? Has my worst fear of my body completely blowing up and me gaining all this weight actually happened? But when you have gone through those cycles, you understand that there's the process. And, you do gain weight during a reverse diet. And let's talk about that. What was the process like in getting down to a lean body weight and then going into a reverse diet and seeing the scale jump up?
So I think it's interesting the way that coaches and social media and even scientists describe processes because here I am telling you the science is the science. Girl Fit Method is not doing anything revolutionary. You're just walking us through the science, right? But then when you ask a question to a coach, their first answer is always, well, it depends because everyone's different. And so those are such different things because is everyone different or is the science the science?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what ends up being scary is because you want to trust it, you're hearing the science, but you're also being told everyone's different. So does the science not apply to me or does it?
Mm.
So your reference of stepping into a dark room, like you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's this feeling where you want to trust the coach that you put your trust into, you want to follow directions. But yeah, I mean, getting bigger, if you will, is frustrating when you've been using markers to tell that you're moving closer to your goal, and then you're using the same markers that are then showing you the opposite. It gets nerve-wracking. The first reverse that I did, woo-wee, and like
Yeah.
knowing where I wanted to be, I mean, the absolute madhouse that my head was all the time. And it was funny too. I was going through an emotional roller coaster of, yes, I'm eating more. Yes, I don't have to eat chicken every day. but ugh, yeah, I mean, body checking in a mirror and trying on jeans, and
It's hard.
it's working.
It is hard. It is really difficult. And when you talk about the science, you're referencing the science, yes, but let's talk about the fact that we're all individuals. So science, gives us the principles, I suppose, that underpin any kind of concept. But when you think about the human body, it's like, one man's cure is another man's poison. So, like, even if we think about, I don't know, we don't demonize carbs, right? Now, for some person, if someone's got insulin resistance or if someone has a gluten intolerance, then potentially some carbohydrates are going to be detrimental to that person's health. Now, does that mean that the science about carbohydrates being good to us, good for us, is incorrect? Well, no. We're all different, right? Your body responds, excuse me, so differently. With a reverse diet, it's the same thing, and there is genetics that play a role. There is also the way that your history with dieting also plays a role. And sometimes three things can happen in a reverse diet. I say this all the time. You can gain weight. You will always gain weight. Let me tell you that. So weight gain and fat gain are two different things. So weight gain is just a number that is influenced by a whole range of different things. When you start to eat more, you're going to gain weight. That's got nothing to do with fat. Fat gain is when you actually gain body fat. So when most people are referring to losing weight or gaining weight, they're actually referring to fat. Now that's completely different. You can gain fat in a reverse diet. And for lots of women, they do, but it needs to be a small amount, right? So it's not going to be a huge amount of fat gain unless you are very underweight and unhealthy. You stay the same. So your body composition, your ratio of muscle to fat stays exactly the same. And then in some people who are hyper responders, which are actually the minority of people, they can lose fat throughout that process. And that happens through as we increase their food intake, their activity levels subconsciously improve. And so what's happening is the amount of money, the amount of food that we're giving them isn't enough to sustain actually how much increased energy they have and movement they have. And so therefore they're actually still in a deficit. So that can definitely happen. But look, I think weight gain is a really difficult one. For myself, I've been posting a little bit of content about my own journey recently. And like, as you would know, Diana, it's been a rough kind of time for me in my life. And especially when my brother passed away, I actually have never experienced not eating. I actually physically couldn't eat. I was so distressed for a really long time and I dropped weight really quickly. And what's been super interesting is that as I've started to go back to eat normally, and by normally, I mean the amount of food that I was just eating prior, I've gained that weight very quickly, very quickly. And that is because when you lose fat or weight quickly, you gain it back quite quickly. And that is even the case for me, right? Now, it's somewhat uncomfortable. I was thinking like it's always confronting when, especially it's with clothing, and I'm sure you can feel this, Diana, like when you've worn something and it's felt like it fits normally, or sometimes it even fits a bit big, and then you put that same piece of clothing on and it feels tight, or you can't do it up, you're like, ugh. You could be having the
Yeah.
best day and feeling great, and then you do that and you're like, oh my goodness, I've actually gotten bigger. And there's a couple of options you can take there. You can allow that to ruin your day, or you can go, do you know what? For me, I guess I reflect back and I'm like, well, I've been through a lot and I still am fine. I'm very aware that I'm still very lean. And so for me, in the past though, regardless of whether I was lean or not, that still would have thrown me off and it made me spiral. But what I do is I go, well, it's a season of my life. I'm healthier now. I'm looking after my body. I'm nourishing my body. And the same goes for when you're in a reverse diet. That is probably going to be the case. You're going to find that your clothes are going to be snug and you're going to find that you might gain a little bit of body fat. But what's the trade off there? Like long-term success, being able to find food freedom to actually get to your end goal. Like for you, Diana, get to the body fat percentage that you want to be in, but you need to spend those seasons sometimes at a higher weight, which is very challenging. And at the root of that, and I'd love to hear your point, is that do you link your value to your size? Is it a part of your identity? Because if it is, you're going to find that process incredibly difficult. But if you can detach you as a person, your soul as a person, your health, and the size of your body doesn't change any of that, right? Like you are still completely whole, completely fine, completely amazing, and loved and valued the way that you are. And so if you can go into these seasons of your life thinking, I'm doing this for my health because I want to be the best version of myself, then it makes it slightly easier. It still can feel scary, but you're able to kind of bring your mindset back on track and focus on the end goal. Um, Talk to me about that. What has that been like for you? I know that growing up, weight was a really big topic in your household, and so those thoughts have been instilled into your brain, and they're thoughts that you probably thought your whole life, right? And so that would have been very challenging when you had achieved this goal. You're in a deficit, you lost this weight, going into a reverse diet, clothes are feeling tighter, the scale's going up. How have you dealt with that?
So what's been the driver for me is knowing how healthy I am. I literally went to go get blood work a few months ago, and I've had the same doctor since I was 18. And she told me I'm healthier now at 35 than I was at 18.
Wow.
I I don't even take vitamins anymore because I'm getting what I need from the way that I'm feeding myself. Like I'm getting the nutrients and the vitamins that I need from the food because I'm fueling myself properly. Um, but it's the thoughts creep in,
Mm,
it's habits don't change overnight. Just like my habits to get healthier, my habits of that mindset don't get any easier. Body checking is a thing. When you go past a building with reflective windows, you're checking yourself out. And because I'm more confident, I'm going out more, so I'm taking more pictures. And I probably one of the most painful things that I go through is taking a picture, and instead of looking at the picture and reflecting on the memory of that day, I'm checking, oh, my arms don't look good, or, oh, I look fat in those jeans. That's probably the most painful thing that I go through
mm. Yeah.
that I'm still actively working on.
Yeah. And I appreciate you being so honest. I sometimes think those thoughts don't ever leave, to be honest. They can be always, and they'll quieten, like they will quieten down. Um, but they're always there, and it's about challenging them. And I think the more that you challenge them, it's like you exercise any muscle, you get better at it. And I've seen that with you as well. I think, like you were saying, the first reverse diet was really difficult, and it hasn't meant that you haven't felt that way during your other reverse diets. But for yourself, you have to remind yourself that maybe what you're thinking isn't logical. They say feelings aren't facts, and feelings aren't facts. We can choose to think however we want to think about ourselves, but the more that we've thought something, like you said, the more of a habit it's become, it just becomes instinct. But we need to challenge that instinct. I would say the majority of women would feel that way. Like we are still so self-absorbed. We really are, like we are the center of our own world. And we are the ones that pick ourselves apart. If we were to hang out and I was spending time with you when you were in a calorie deficit, then when you're at maintenance and you can see these subtle changes in your body, I can't. I can't. You know why? Because I'm more focused on looking at my own body.
That part. Yep.
100%. We are our own worst critics. And it's about getting out of your head and reminding yourself that like health is wealth. You lose your health, you lose everything. You lose your health, it doesn't actually matter how skinny you are or how lean you are. You don't have the freedom to live your life. And that's really sad. And so, if we can go into it with that health first mindset, it can be, an absolute game changer. But in saying that, I think it's important for every woman to know, just as you said, Diana, it's a struggle. And especially we're brought up in a society where weight and the way that you look is so incredibly important. It actually is. It really is. Like, let's be honest. People value that.
Yeah.
People value people that are attractive, that fit the norms. You just do. I'd be lying if I said it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What I would
No one commented when I was, when I began the journey, no one commented on my weight. But every time they would see me after and I was dropping pounds, dropping inches, oh, you look so great.
and what's
You
that
know, and
what's that
there's no
reinforcing
right
to
way
you?
to say it.
But what is that also reinforcing to you? Your value's gone up. Your perceived value has gone up, which it hasn't. I want to say that it actually truly hasn't, because when we think about the people that care and love for us, they don't give, I mean, we care that you're healthy, but ultimately we just love you. And you as a person hasn't changed. You might be healthier, which is a wonderful thing, but you are still you, and those that love you will love you. And I think the people that are so hyper focused on the way that others look, I think are people that probably shouldn't even be in our life anyway, right? It's so shallow, but we live in a very shallow society. And this is where we need to take responsibility for the way that we view ourselves and the life that we want to live. We can listen to what society tells us we should be or what we should do, or we can decide what's good for us, who we want to be, who we want to surround ourselves with, and whether we find value in who we are, regardless of what the exterior is. But it's hard because there are a lot of loud voices out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I mean, from my perspective, what I've really admired about you, and I guess what we wanted, Dinah and I both wanted to get across, is that reverse dieting's hard. And it's hard for everyone. It's hard for you. It's hard for me. It's never easy. And people wait until they feel like it will be easy to start. And you just will never start. But the more that you do something, the more confidence you build in yourself, you've got that confidence to go into that next decision that you need to make or whatever phase that looks like for you with more confidence because you've done hard things before and the world didn't fall apart, you know?
Yeah. And the trust that you build in yourself by doing what you know is good for you. There's something to be said about the trust that you build in yourself. We always talk about, if we trust in other people, what about the trust in yourself?
Mm,
What are you doing for you?
mm. That is so, so
Women
true.
are women are natural givers, right? Like that's what we want to do. But like what are you giving for yourself? How are you filling your own cup?
And do we actually trust ourselves? A lot of us don't either. We trust the voices of other people around us, but we don't truly trust our instincts and what we think is going to be best for us because we're constantly trying to please other people, which is an issue, but something that we all need to work on. But like, besides all of that, there is just so many wins. I mean, I think back to when you first started and the freedom you have now. Like, Dana, you eat out a lot. Let's talk about that. The freedom that you now have within your life to have the flexibility to live a full life where it's not revolving around getting to the gym, having to eat as little as possible. Like, what does that look like for you?
So for going out, I do have two different dynamics depending on which phase of my process that I'm in. I do know which restaurants around me have calories on their menu. So that is something that I don't just hold myself accountable. My coaches don't just hold me accountable. The people around me also help me with that accountability. So a lot of people do know that if they invite me out, they do ask, are there specific restaurants that are more Diana friendly, that are more apt to you continuing your goals. Otherwise, I mean, I'm looking at what's on the menu. I do look ahead, just like, planning my week and where my protein's coming from during the week. I do try to look ahead if I can. And if not, I've been doing it long enough now that I know the nutrients that are in certain foods and I know what's a better option than others. And the thing is, too, what's really left my brain is there's no such thing as a cheat meal anymore. There's no bad food. There are some foods that are more nutritious for us. But at the end of the day, like eating a slice of pizzas or some French fries is not going to do anything to you. Are
Mm,
there better options on the menu health wise, nutritionally, with more vitamins? Maybe, sure. But it's just food.
100%. 100%. And like, what was your mindset prior to being able to, like, we've increased your maintenance calories quite high now. We're up at about maintenance is about 2526. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is, sorry, 2,500, 2,600, which is
Yeah.
incredible. So, like, that was never the case beforehand. That freedom, what does that allow for you? Like, what does it actually tangibly look like? How's it changed your life?
I would say the biggest way it's changed my life is just feeling like I have more options. I think it's so easy to get caught up in the day to day and know that, I can only eat these foods or I can only go to these places. But the freedom, even something as minor as having a glass of orange juice with my breakfast, or instead of ordering a vodka Diet Coke like I usually do, ordering something fun and fruity while I'm with the girls,
Mm.
and not stressing when I'm out for a girlfriend's birthday. And I went to a dinner semi recently and I ordered shrimp for dinner while everyone else was enjoying their dinner. So that freedom of kind of knowing that a single meal isn't going to divert me from my goals, knowing that I know which options that I do have to make that choice, but also knowing that the options are just like, it's just food.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's fueling me. And honestly, if I have the French fries, leg day the next day is gonna be so good. It's gonna be such a good leg day.
Use those
So
calories, put them to work. Absolutely.
absolutely.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. It's just been such an honor. You've been so inspirational to me personally. You do post a lot about your journey. For the listeners, where can they find you?
So my Instagram is my first and last name. I'm very creative. So it's at Diana Debsky on Instagram. And then my TikTok is at Diana Girl Fit Method.
Awesome. And I guess for anyone listening that's scared to make that leap into reverse dieting, what would be your biggest piece of advice?
I would say be self-aware. Do know what your limits and your triggers are and communicate that to your coach. That's literally what they're there for. Communicate your feelings, communicate if you're actually feeling something. Or a bad habit that I had is I would look at my measurements and say, oh, this measurement went up and this measurement went down. And my coaches would be like, wait, are you just saying that because you're a numbers person? Or are you saying that because you're feeling emotional about it? so,
Yes.
so the self-awareness that you build, trusting in the process. This is a point where you need to communicate. This is your coach is not your therapist, but treat them like your therapist. They are there. I promise that any thought that you're having, it's not some new thought that your coach hasn't heard before. You have to communicate with your coach. I had a really bad habit at the beginning of my time with Girl Fit Method that my check-ins with them were so short, so short. And I felt like I was on the journey by myself, but I had signed up for a coach, right? But that wasn't my fault. The coach only knows what she knows. If I'm
Mm,
not communicating my thoughts and what I need and what I'm doing and feeling, it's not going to get me far. So utilize your coach. Actually be involved in your own process.
100%. And like, that's why it's also very important to have a coach that you trust. Because in order to be vulnerable like that, you need to feel like it's a safe space. If you feel like you're going to get reprimanded or shamed for how you're feeling, then of course you're not going to open up. But it will still feel scary to be vulnerable with someone. But as you know, with us, I mean, this is what we deal with day in, day out. Every thought and fear that you have about your journey, I'm telling you, there is 100 other girls that have expressed that to us. We get it. And that's kind of expected as well. But yeah, you're so right. Be open, be honest, and just lean on your coaches as much as possible. Thank you so much for coming on, Diana. You're an absolute star. You know, I love your guts. And I know you're not done yet with your journey, and I can't wait to see. I guess like there will never be no end goal. I hope there is never an end goal for any of us. We always want to evolve, and we always want to change and become the best version of ourselves. And that's a lifelong journey essentially. But just want to say massive thank you to you for inspiring us and me and all of your followers. You're an incredible person.